Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, let me just minimize this. Okay. All right. This is our agenda for today. We're going to skip welcome and introduction since we're doing this by webinar for the purposes of this discussion. Okay, so first getting into the grant background, the notice of funding availability was posted in late June, and it's available at this web page here. This is a critical page for everybody to bookmark and return to frequently. What we do is that's where the notice of funding availability was posted. That's also where the request for applications was posted on July 10th. There is also a recorded presentation of the Enterprise Grants Management System in that section, and then once they're ready, we will try to publish this recording. Hopefully it turns out well, as well as the frequently asked questions. So please continue to go there. That's really your hub for all information related to the grant. The application is due August 21st at 3 p.m. We really recommend at least trying to be complete and attempting to submit early just to make sure that there's no glitches. It's due at 3 p.m. and we only extend the deadline if there's a systematic issue that affects all of the users, which is pretty rare. Then we will evaluate the applications, and we're hoping to announce awards in September. Okay, so walking through the purpose of the grant a little bit, we're looking to build the capacity of DC's early care and education system to expand and enhance the quality services for young children and their families. There's a strong focus in this grant on the business administrative needs of child development facility owners, as well as supporting the relationships with parents, guardians, as well as the community. A little bit more information about the history of this grant. So we are combining. One second. Okay, so we're combining 3 previous grants into one grant, and the 3 previous grants are becoming 3 program areas. So we had the Quality Rating and Improvement System, Capital Quality, the Child Care Resource and Referral, and the Shared Service Business Alliance. So each of those previous 3 grants is becoming this one large grant with 3 program areas. The reason we did that is to better align the strategies, the strategic logic behind these grants, and to enhance collaboration between the organizations that are working on this. What we're looking to do is have each program area build on the infrastructure that was established by the previous grantees. In the next section or so, my colleague Michelle is going to get into the grantee responsibilities. We tried to make this section really exhaustive to really lay out the universe of what's been happening so far, so that new folks that might be interested in applying understand what they will be building on, not really restarting anything here. We're really expecting collaboration and coordination between applicants, between whoever's implementing the 3 program areas, and we'll get into kind of what that could look like in consortiums and such. A key point is that the services need to continue uninterrupted for those who benefit from the services of each of the program areas. However, we really do want to see innovation, and where you can innovate is how you're arranging the work to be done, whether you're doing it directly, all of it, whether you're contracting out some of it, or you have partner organizations. That's a key area of innovation, as well as how you approach family engagement, technical assistance, professional development, and working with culturally and linguistically diverse populations. Applicants also need to demonstrate the use of evidence-based trauma-informed approaches to care and learning. These are the objectives of the RFA. They are pretty critical because you're going to be organizing the activities of the grant around those in your work plan. We'll get into that a little bit later, but you will need to have 3 activities for each objective. So start to look through these objectives and really make sure you're clear on what each of them means. Continuing with purpose of the grant, this is a little bit more in depth about the program areas. So the program areas are linked to specific award amounts. So if you apply to program area 1, you're eligible for a specific amount. Program Area 2, a different amount, and Program Area 3, a third amount. If you combine that and you apply for Program Area 1 and 2, you add up those two amounts. So the maximum amount for which you're eligible is related to what you're applying for. The total amount that you could apply for if you're working on all three program areas is $3.15 million. And I'm going to skip ahead for just a minute to kind of show you what those amounts are. So Program Area 1, it breaks it down per year. This is a 4-year grant, and the amounts change for Program Area 1 and 3. The reason for that is that Program Area 1 is the QRIS, and each year there are more providers that are coming into the QRIS system, which requires more quality facilitators, so we need to channel more funds to Program Area 1 each year. Program Area 2 will stay consistent at this amount, and Program Area 3 should ideally actually go down because fees will be paid by the providers in, and that should link to the sustainability of the shared services, so the grant amount should go down as the fees cover part of that. Okay, so going back a couple steps, the period of the grant is 4 years, as I mentioned, ending September 30th, 2023. Each fiscal year with OSSI starts October 1st of one year and continues to September 30th of the next year. So we will be going into fiscal year 2020. So the first year of the grant is October 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2020. When you are doing your budget and your application, you're really applying for year 1. You can explain what will happen over the 4 years, but each year is year 1. Each application is kind of year 1. For those grantees that win, the grantee or grantees that will win this grant competition, they will have to reapply next year for funding, but it will not be competitive next year, contingent upon this information here. If we have funds available, demonstration that progress has been made, compliance, and appropriate expenditures. Okay, I think we've covered most of this. I will mention specifically that we are anticipating issuing 1 to 3 awards, and that makes sense because there's 3 program areas. And I think we've clarified kind of the what we're looking for in the award amounts and the maximum eligibility. Again, if you have questions, just type in the chat box. We're going to keep going, but we'll take those questions at the end after we turn off the recording. Getting into eligibility, this is mentioned on page 17 to 18 in the RFA. We are looking for not-for-profit, for-profit, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and agencies. They need to have experience in business and financial management, system design, early childhood, and a working knowledge of the early childhood landscape in the district. And we're also looking for knowledge of child development facility licensing regulations, developmentally appropriate practice. The scoring rubric is a great place to really look at the competencies that we'll be evaluating you on the basis of, but this is just eligibility. Are you eligible to even apply? I think this is pretty clear, but we'll go one more time because there's been a lot of questions on consortiums. So we are expecting to award one primary applicant, or it could be, and that applicant could be in a consortium or not. So if you're in a consortium, what you will be doing is you'll be saying, my organization is covering Program Area 1, and we are contracting out Program Area 2 to Organization B. Organization B would appear in your budget under professional services as one line item, and then you would detail the scope of responsibilities through an uploaded memorandum of understanding or partnership agreement. We're pretty specific in kind of telling you guys that that's how you would do that financially. We can't have 2 grantees in one application, 2 primary grantees. There has to be a primary and a sub would, and the sub would be kind of this contractor level. So there's one fiscally responsible agent that's submitting the application. You can apply to be part of more than one consortium. What we mean by that is you could apply to be the primary applicant on one application and then a sub or a contractor in another person's application. We're not really expecting to see 2 applications with one organization as the primary. If that were the case, it would be better just to say, we're the primary, we're going to do this, and we're going to contract out this kind of work, and here's why. and here's the kind of organizations that we might be looking for. An example would be so-and-so. That would be better for us to see. EGMS, the grants portal system, will only let one application to one organization, and that's done. The allowable use of funds is in page 19, and we're expecting you to let us know how you're going to use the funds. Oh, sound is off. Okay, let me know if that's better, Pila. Okay. Okay, great. All right. So some changes from the previous year of the grant. Obviously, pulling all 3 grant programs into one is a change. And like I mentioned, we're doing that for better coordination and collaboration between these 3 program areas. We also want to make sure that people are building on what was previously started by our current grantees whose grants are expiring. The last change is that previously the Shared Service Business Alliance was only for child development homes, and through some extensive discussion, we have decided to allow small centers with 4 classrooms or less to participate in the Shared Service Business Alliance, because we have learned that they face many of the same challenges as homes. So that's another key change. This is the authorizing legislation, and it lets you know where the funds are from. This is probably really important for your accountants or auditors, internal auditors. If you have those at your organization, they're going to want to know how much of it is federal funds. So we can definitely talk about that with whoever gets the funding, because it would likely require you to go through a single audit. But we can definitely talk about that. So I will say it is a combination of federal and local funds. The federal authority is our Child Care Development Block Grant, so you should definitely be familiar with that, because that kind of gives you the entire world of what OSSI is trying to do in the district. Okay, so these are good resources for you to see what's currently happening with each of these grants. So these are resources for you. Okay, grant requirements, I'm going to turn over to my colleague Michelle, who's going to get into the grantee responsibilities pretty deeply.
Thank you, Tara. As we mentioned before, the new grant is broken down into 3 program areas, and I'll give a general overview of each area. Please remember to refer to the RFA for more details. Program Area 1, this covers the QRIS, and Program Area 3, the shared services. And these are where we engage primarily with child care providers, and Program Area 2, which covers child care resource and referral system, and this engages the child care providers as well as families and the community. We are looking at grantee partners to maintain up-to-date knowledge in the core competencies. That's outlined in the scoring rubric later on in the section. And we're also expecting timely documentation, data entry into the online applications and other computer software. We're also looking at ability to demonstrate excellent written and verbal communication skills, observation and listening skills, and to have a commitment to diversity and cultural relevancy in the applications. So just keep in mind to clearly state where these areas are covered. We're also expecting grantees and partners to encourage and support facilities in fully utilizing the Early Childhood Share DC to promote their businesses, save money, and enhance the overall communication and marketing with the providers. We're looking at evidence of working knowledge of OSSI's core knowledge areas. That's also found at this website that we have here. And a strong understanding of the District of Columbia's Common Core early learning standards. We're also looking at having grantees show at least 2 staff that are trained and reliable in using the classroom assessment scoring system for class pre-K. Looking for pre-kindergarten and the infant and toddler environmental rating scale revised, the ITERs, the Family Child Care Environment Rating Scale revised figures, and any revised tools thereafter. And just keep in mind that Program Area 1, the QRIS, is looking at 100% of quality facilitators that must meet this requirement. Part of the reliability of the instrument, we're referring to the consistency of scores over time and among different raters. And we're looking to see several important types of reliability that will be used for these instruments. Also keep in mind to maintain a system for logging of the technical assistance and professional development offerings that are included with your contractors and any other program areas. Now we'll go a little bit into each program area. As far as the QRIS, grantees must develop and document its system for receiving ongoing feedback and making relevant adjustments to the program. And of course, ensuring continuity of services to early childhood educators and administrators. Just keep in mind to make sure we have emphasis on the continuity of service. For the program area 2, CCR&R, we're looking at the system that will function to support communication, facilitate referrals, and help improve the quality of early care and education in DC. We want to stress that the grantee must employ staff that represent the linguistic and cultural diversity of the children and families served, including Spanish and Amharic-speaking staff. The grantee should always look to leverage a variety of strategies that link families to child care assistance programs and providers to evidence-based services and supports that build the capacity of DC to deliver high-quality early care and education for all children. And keeping in mind, we're also looking for ongoing feedback and making relevant adjustments to the program. Again, refer to the RFA for additional details. For Program Area 3, Shared Services Business Alliance, we're looking for proposed services to address technical assistance and professional development, and should be reducing the administrative and operational burden associated with managing child development homes. We're looking at expanded homes now and small child care development centers. For example, those with 4 classrooms or less. And also involved with that is having appropriate staff with Spanish and Amharic speaking languages. Under this grant, we want to stress the current alliance will be expanded to allow, as I mentioned before, small centers, and that they face similar problems and administrative challenges as a child development home. I think that's it.
Okay.
Back to Tara.
All right. We are going to keep going. And now really get into the process and the scoring rubric. Okay, so applications, as I mentioned, are due August 21st at 3 p.m. And I'll talk about what that submission looks like. Then they are reviewed and evaluated by external reviewers. OSSI does have the final decision-making authority, but we use external experts in the field to score the applications. And then we will announce the awards in September. So I'm going to get into the questions you're going to be answering and how you're going to be evaluated now. So I think it'll be helpful just to reference in the RFA, it starts on page 34, and I would definitely recommend that because this scoring rubric is a little bit more complex than our others because there are the 3 program areas. So to start, what we're looking for is a summary, which is not scored, but it gives us a good framing of the project, of the organization, of you as an applicant, how you're going to contribute to the goal of the grant, which is renamed here succinctly, and the structure of the program. So how you're going to cover those program areas, the amount that you're requesting, which again is linked to what program areas you're covering. And then, like Michelle and I have mentioned now, I think 5 times, about how you're going to ensure the services are uninterrupted. The first category, I'm going to keep sending questions in. We're going to just keep track of them and get to them at the end. For information about organization, this is the first section. There are 2 subcategories in here. So this is a total of 10 points. The first category is mission and history, and the second one, which we'll get to on the next slide, is strategic logic. So here, this is really about you as an organization and who you are and why you're applying for the grant. So mission and history is tell us your mission statement, your core programming, why it's relevant to the purpose of the grant, which is stated in a couple places, one of which is restated again in the executive summary, but also in the RFA under the section purpose. We want to know about your history doing these kinds of things, supporting and sustaining small businesses and engaging with the ECE community, the early childhood education community. Similarly, with strategic logic, we want to know why you want to manage this grant at this point in your organization's history. So why now? And then tell us the strategic logic of your consortium. So if you're doing any with any partners, if you're working with partners, why did you select this partner if you haven't selected them yet? What are you looking for? Why are you outsourcing this? And why are you doing what you're doing, right? The next category is organizational knowledge. It's 35 points, and it has 4 subcategories. So I'm going to tell you all the subcategories first, and then we'll walk through each one. The first one is kind of core knowledge competencies, which are named on this slide and the next slide. So no matter what program area you're applying to, you need to have knowledge in all of these program areas, in these competencies. The next one is gap identification in the early childhood landscape. Third is organizational networks. And then last is ongoing collaboration with government stakeholders. So going back through each one, this first one is all program areas, experience in the program area to which your organization is applying. This is really what core competencies you need. So you can see them here. I'll just walk through. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear, all of those in there. Next is the gap identification. So here we're really looking for you to give us kind of a lay of the land of what you see in the DC birth to 5 system pertaining to families and providers and parents, communities. So what are some gaps that you're seeing, and what would be your recommendation to address these gaps? This isn't really to say that you're going to be specifically working on these things. It's just to get your kind of bird's eye perspective and see what insights you have into the specific environment here. Next is organizational networks. So this is similar to the next one. We want to know what partnerships you have with public and private entities that will complement your organization's capacity and help you in delivering the services under the program area that you're applying to. We also want to see that you have knowledge of the DC Early Childhood System approach, which is the teddy bear. For those of you that are familiar, there is a picture in the RFA of the teddy bear, so you can see what I'm talking about. It's kind of a higher level systems approach to what OSSI tries to do and how we work with our partner agencies and grantees to achieve much larger goals than just education. So focusing on health, development, education, and well-being. This is similar. So how will you foster and maintain a collaborative relationship with OSSI and Dell, as well as other district entities? And there's a number of them mentioned here specifically. The next category is implementation of the program within the process to provide and monitor services. So process to provide and monitor services is really you telling us how you would implement the grant, and it is the most heavily weighted. So implementation of program is the first subcategory. It has a prompt for all program areas, and then also a prompt for each one specifically, each program area specifically. So all program areas, how will services continue uninterrupted, and how is your program innovative and building upon the existing model? That should be a common thread that you are now sick of me and Michelle saying, because those are really key points. Going into each program area, so program area 1, QRAS, you will be explaining these things, how you're going to plan and recruit, adhere to the minimum requirements, how you're going to facilitate the development and implementation of these things. There's a lot of acronyms introduced here, which will be clearer in the RFA, but just for the purposes of this discussion, communities of practice, The continuous quality improvement plan, technical assistance is TA, and professional development is PD, and the on-site administrator is OSA. Did I get all those, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Next is the program area 2. So we want to know your plan to provide typical CCR&R services. So that might be a little bit of research looking at what other CCR&Rs do in other states. Everyone in the U.S. has a child care development block grant, every state, our state entities. So everyone is doing CCR&R services, so you can get an idea looking at other states. You can also see what has been done in the district specifically. We also want to see how you're providing consumer education and outreach. And then program area 3 is very general because we are leaving room for innovation here, but how you will implement the business alliance. The next subcategory under process to provide and monitor services is communication strategy. So this is a really critical piece of the grant. We want to make sure that you're conducting outreach and delivering services. Again, another thread that you're going to hear us repeating is the culturally and linguistically diverse populations, especially Amharic and Spanish. So that's another emphasis and priority here. We want to see how the communication strategy is rooted within that child care development block grant plan. We want to know how you're going to work with OSSI to help us have a larger communication plan about the successes of the grant. Getting into each program area, these are a little different. So program area 1 for QIS, we want to know kind of your elevator speech, your pitch of what capital quality is, how it works, and the benefits. Program area 2, we want to know your plan to disseminate and collect and disseminate relevant information. And program area 3 is a little similar to program area 1, so it's really about recruiting. How will you recruit and attract members to participate? Okay, next is process for continuous learning. So this is another key part of providing the services, is that you have to collect feedback and continually make improvements. So we just want to know how you're going to do that. So there is a prompt for all program areas. Program area 1 gets into the PD plan and how you're going to manage the continuous quality improvement. Program area 2, a needs assessment for providers to make sure that you're providing PD on the right things. And how you're going to use the director's corners, which we understand are very successful tools to work with the providers, and they've really been working well. So we would like director's corners to continue in the next iteration of these programs. Program area 3, we want to know how you're going to keep assessing what the home providers need, how they're going to join the alliance, how you're building relationships. Give us the list of the back office functions. And again, look at that general grantee responsibilities. Michelle provided us an overview, but in the RFA, it's much more exhaustive of what's been happening and what we're looking to continue. The last thing we want in program area 3 under the process for continuous learning is how you're going to introduce that fee structure and expanding services to small centers. Okay, the last section in process to provide and monitor services is about your work plan and your data collection and evaluation plan. Back when we were talking about the objectives, I mentioned that you will need to organize your activities around those 6 objectives. That will be done in the work plan. After we're done, in a couple sections, I'm going to open up the test environment and show you what the application really looks like if you haven't accessed it already. In the work plan, you have to have 3 activities per objective, so that's at least 18 activities. So we want to know how you're going to do each one of those, who's responsible, the month and year when it will be performed. The evaluation and data collection plan, these are also organized around each objective. So we want to hear from you how you're collecting data to assess and evaluate the functions of the work, the frequency, who's responsible for that. So that should really link to the section about the continuous improvement, the process for continuous learning. So use your evaluation and data collection plan as a tool for demonstrating what you're talking about in that narrative section. The detailed planned expenditure is the last section, and it's 10 points. It's composed of the financial management and the budget itself. They're each 5. So the financial management is a narrative section. So especially under this second bullet here, if you are contracting out any program areas, we definitely want to know how you're going to manage that, what kind of contract you would have, if it would be based on deliverables or if it would be cost reimbursable, kind of what contract you'd like to have and how that will be managed and monitored, what controls are in place, and that you have processes to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Last is the budget. I would definitely encourage you to look at the RFA, especially on page 39 to 40, about the budget, because we gave you kind of a lot of like a cheat sheet of the budget. So like, tell us, we told you exactly what we want in salaries and benefits, and then we told you what's required. A full-time program manager is required. We need to see Spanish and Amharic speaking staff. If you, under professional services, that's where we'd want to see those contractors that are implementing other program areas and so forth. So definitely look there so you understand where to put each item in the budget. And I'll talk about another tool to help you understand how we expect budgets to look. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to kind of switch over and talk about EGMS itself a little bit. But before I do that, I want to kind of navigate to the grant page that we talked about. So I'm going to exit here. You should still be able to see my screen. Okay, so this is the grant page that I was talking about. And this is linked in the presentation, and I'll also show you how to get here. So this is the Building and Sustaining Quality Early Care and Education. The text here is just the text from the Notice of Funding Availability. You can click here to get the RFA, and then at the very bottom, you can see it again. Here's the RFA, here's the Notice of Funding Availability. And if you haven't checked out this document, let's see if it'll open here. I would really recommend it. This is like a quick one-page document that we worked very hard on to try to make it clear why we're combining the grants, what the theory of change is, all the important dates are here. So it's just really like a good tool for you. I would encourage you to use it if you have leadership at your organization that doesn't want to read the 60-page RFA. This is really who that could be for, or for other funders, or like I said, like your board, someone like that who doesn't have time to read the RFA but really needs to be in the know. Please review the one-pager. Another thing that's on here is, or should be on here, is this. So this EGMS overview training, this is a recording, and you will hear my voice of the next piece that I'm going to do. So because we have a recording of that already, I'm going to move a little bit quickly through that. But what that is really for whoever is going to be logging into EGMS to submit your actual application or submit your reimbursement request if you get the grant. That's really a training for them. So we'll get into that now, but just I'm going quickly because it already is available. So EGMS that I keep talking about is our district-wide system for both submitting your application and then if you're awarded, managing the grant itself. This is the best link to use, this grants.aussie.dc.gov. And there are a couple links on here to training videos and guides. What I will also say is that you can access these. I'm just going to go back out 1 second. Okay, so this is the EGMS homepage. If you come down here and you just click on training, you can access a whole lot more things that I'm referencing. I'm just calling out a couple of different tools, but these all exist here. Another great thing for you to know is the support and information button. This is what we say the call center. They can triage any technical glitches that you might be getting. So you can definitely contact me, but if it's something, I will probably refer you to the team if it's something hinky about EGMS and not specific to our grant. So you can contact me or them. We will get you to the right place. So going back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so for anyone that has never used EGMS before, you need to register. To register, you're going to need this number, this FAIN, the Federal Employee Identification Number. It's an organizational level number. So what you do is when you go to EGMS, you click Login, and then this little box will appear. You click New User, and then it's going to have you search by the FAIN, the F-E-I-N. If it can't find it, it will prompt you to either become a new vendor or a new user. A new vendor means that the organization itself is new to EGMS and it will not recognize your FAIN. It will say, we don't know your FAIN. Please, you're a new vendor, and it will walk you through that process. If it knows your FAIN, but you yourself don't have access, it will walk you through it will help you with the new user process. So those are just kind of two distinctions to make. One important thing is that sometimes people don't know who has access at EGMS. Their organization is not a new vendor, they're an existing vendor, but they don't know who has access in EGMS and what kind of access they have. So what I would encourage you to do is email the help desk and say, like from someone probably higher up in the organization and say, you know, I'm the president of this organization. I need a list of everyone in my organization who has access to EGMS from our organization and what roles they have, because we're preparing to submit a grant application, and they will respond to you. So that's important because there are 3 kinds of EGMS roles, and if you have the wrong kind, you can't submit the grant application. And the last thing that you want to do is find out that you have the wrong kind on August 21st. So there's view only, which is, you would know if you had view only because you wouldn't be able to make any edits or changes. The more confusing is between data entry and authorized representative. So for data entry, you can create applications, you can create reimbursement requests and save data, but you can't submit anything. And that is very problematic for people that don't realize that they only have that access and not authorized representative. Authorized representative is usually a leader at the organization. However, sometimes people are like national organizations and the chairman of the board himself is not going to be entering your EGMS application. So if that's happening, OSSI might request an email from someone high up in the organization to approve that you're getting that role. So just be prepared for that. Like I said, if you don't have access or you don't know who has access, you need to update access and people have left, now is really the time. Okay, like I mentioned, you can do this thing where I just say you clean house. You can contact the EGMS help desk and figure out who has credentials, and that request to figure out who has credentials has to come from someone who's an authorized representative. These are the links for some of the important things that I mentioned before, the FEIN, the DUNS, and the SAM we'll mention in the next piece. You need to have you will need to have a DUNS number to ultimately receive payment, and a SAM expiration date. You do not need a master supplier form at the time of application. We request a W-9 in the other attachments, which we'll talk about. Okay, so this is about central data. So I'm going to kind of step out of here and walk into the test environment. Okay, to just kind of point out a couple things about EGMS that we've just talked about. Okay, so when you log into EGMS, this is going to be the screen that you're going to see. You can just ignore this part. This is not relevant for everybody here. This is just an internal thing. And I'll show you kind of the dashboard and what a couple things look like. So this is the main dashboard that you're going to see. You are not going to have a billion grants in here. I have a billion grants in here because this is the test environment where we test all of our grants at OSSI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up just to show everybody a couple things. So here's the name of my organization. Here's my fiscal year. As I mentioned, the fiscal year starts October 1st, 2019, and then it goes until September 30th, 2020. That fiscal year is 2020. So you want to be in 2020. This is a 2020 grant competition. What's going to happen is when you first log in, you're not going to see anything under created at all because you haven't created anything. You're going to have a lot of things under available, which are all the grants that you might be eligible for. What you're going to do is come down here and you're going to click create. After you click create for the first time, it's going to migrate up here. So just be aware, people say, I can't find the grant anywhere, it's down here. Central data will also be down here. Once you click create, it's going to come up here. So I'm going to open central data and show a couple things because you have to submit central data as part of your application. We like you to do all of it. If you can't do all of it, I will show you the pieces that you have to do, but this is a common mistake that people don't do central data and then they get an error message that they're not able to submit and they don't understand what it is. So central data is composed of a couple pieces. It has your central contacts, who at your organization should know about any and all grants that you're applying to. It has this DUNS number and SAM's expiration date, which are federally issued. If you have them, put them here and upload. Because if you get the grant, it's going to hold up your payments if you don't have these. So if you can get them now, please get them, but they do take a number of weeks to get. So if you can't get them by August 21st, it's not going to prevent you from submitting, but it will prevent you from getting paid. So I would go ahead and request it. If if you're submitting a grant application, there's a likelihood that you could be awarded. So please get that started. What you really need to do is review the certifications, assurances, and verification. This is what will not let you submit if you don't do it. So you have to review these. These are things that lawyers really like to look at if you have any in-house legal counsel. they want to know what is in here. So these are the things that you have to agree to be able to have a grant with OSSI. So please review these. Then here are the assurances. It's a lot of disclosures and compliance with various federal regulations. So there's a lot in here, so please review. Okay, so this box, what will happen here is that there will be a blue box that will say legal entity agrees. You have to click that. When you click that button, this date will auto-populate. I get a lot of emails where people say, I can't enter text into this box. It's because you have to click legal entity agrees. Once you're done with the certification insurances, at least, hopefully you're filling out everything, but if not, the certifications and assurances is really the minimum of what you have to do. You come to the Submit tab. These up here are tabs. This is an important term, and I'll explain why. You need to run a consistency check, which I can't because it's already been approved, but you'll run a consistency check. It will, the wheel will spin, and then if everything looks okay, a Submit to OSSI button will appear down in the bottom right. That you have to submit the button. So until it says application was submitted to OSSI, it's not really submitted. So that's very important. And when we say August 21st at 3 p.m., we mean that blue OSSI Submit to OSSI button is clicked. This is central data. It looks a little bit different. I'll show you what it looks like in the application itself, but just to I want to walk through central data because it's been a sticking point for applicants before. Okay. So we talked about this, what you need for central data. You need your central contacts, DUNS number and SAM's expiration date if you have it. You're going to get a copy of your organization entity overview from SAM.gov if you have these DUNS number and SAM expiration date things. Like I said, you run the consistency check and then the blue submit button will appear and you click submit. Okay, so other things that you should be doing right now. So after you have access, you should be familiarizing yourself with EGMS. So this is just what we walked through. So once you log in, you see the main grant dashboard, and this is just a screenshot to show somebody else at your organization who's maybe not listening to the webinar. The fiscal year that you see under created. So remember, at first it was not under created, it was under available, and we had to click create. Then it migrates to created, and the central data piece about agreeing to the assurances is really critical. Okay, so here is the name of your grant. This is what it looks like in EGMS if you haven't found it yet. It's Building and Sustaining QECE because our grant name is too long for EGMS. So you need to come here and click Create. Don't worry about this submissions by date. This is just a funny thing in the test environment. And like I said, once you click Create, you just do that one time and then it moves under Available, under Created. Okay, this is what I was talking about, and this is another common question that we get is that there is no submit button, there is no submit button. In the grant application itself, you will go to the submit tab, you run the consistency check, and then the submit button will appear. Okay, so here's an example of something. So I ran the consistency check and I got an error that there was nothing on other attachments, so the submit button did not appear for me. Once I fix that, that's the button that I'm talking about. So I hope that's clear to everybody. And you'll see what I'm talking about as you go through the grant application, but just to give a heads up on that submit button and consistency check issue. Okay, I'm going to skip through these because this is more generic about EGMS and the type of grants issued by OSSI. We are talking about a competitive grant at this time. And we talked about the create and available. Yep. Okay, so some general tips. EGMS will time out after 60 minutes, so please save early and often. If you want to print the application, the best thing to do is to go to the Application Print tab. You have to request the pieces that you want printed, and it will generate a giant PDF for you. I think we've mentioned this, but start and submit early, so it's due at 3 p.m., but don't click that consistency check button at 3 p.m. because then you'll miss the window, and it's all timestamped so we can see. Contact the help desk. If you have any issues, you can also contact me. Okay, so another thing that I've heard from our grantees was not transparent enough at the outset, so I want to make this really clear, is that OSSI grants are cost reimbursable. So what that means is that you are racking up costs and then you submit a request for payment with supporting documentation. So this timeline here, this is the best case scenario timeline, is that you are racking up costs for this grant, you've won the grant, October 1st to 31st, you submit a request for reimbursement on November 10th, according to the 30-Day Quick Payment Act. If everything looks perfect in that November 10th submission, we will render a check on December 10th. So already we're talking from October 1st to 31st, we're paying you back on December 10th. That clock starts over again if everything is not perfect and we have to say, hey, we reviewed your reimbursement request, but we're missing all this documentation, we get it back to you, you submit it again November 15th, now we're talking December 15th. So I just want this to be really clear because I don't want anybody to be applying for a grant that their organization financially cannot handle. Okay. All right, so a couple more things that we're going to go through. So submission requirements, we talked about this. We need everything to come through EGMS. We talked about central data. The assurances and certifications are really like the bare bones of what you need to do, but if you can do the whole thing with your SAM expiration date and DUNS number, that's better. We can't have anything after 3 p.m. on the date. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is walk you through what the grant itself looks like in EGMS, which is probably the most interesting and important part. Okay, so on your dashboard, again, don't worry about this. You're not going to have all of this. You are going to have under created, so you've gone to available, you've clicked create, and now we're in created. You should just have central data under this assurances and central data, and then going down to competitive grant, you will have building and sustaining quality, early care, and education. Okay, so a couple funny things about EGMS. So you are going to be working on your original application. For the purposes of the test environment, I already submitted an original application to make sure everything looked okay for you guys. What we're going to do now is play in the amendment, which looks the same as the original application. So don't worry about that piece. That's just to explain to you what I'm doing. So when you get in here, like I mentioned before about tabs, these are primary tabs and these are secondary tabs. The secondary tabs down here change based on what's up here. So if I just kind of toggle a little bit, so you see I lost that second layer of tabs. So I think that's just a helpful piece for people to know because they sometimes lose their way and they get lost in EGMS. So the primary level of tabs and overview, this is really information that is from your RFA for your reading pleasure and for your record. Here's my contact information. This is me. This is my colleague. So you can contact me or her. Getting into some other tabs. So general information, this is all from the RFA. Program scope has tertiary tabs, so getting into the grantee responsibilities, OSCE-DEL responsibilities, performance standards, quality assurance. None of this is new information because you've already read through your RFA very deeply. Award administration, this is all from your RFA. Award process is a helpful section. This is really your scoring rubric. We try to be really transparent in how we evaluate and review applications, so we are giving you exactly what we will give your external readers. We are telling you exactly what we are going to tell them on how to review and evaluate. Okay, so getting into the information that you actually need to input. You need to input things in contact information, program information, detailed planned expenditures. You do not need to input anything in funding distribution, and you need to agree to some assurances. So just to kind of lay that out. Contact information, you're going to put in the information here, and this is about this grant specifically. You can add more people. And then at the bottom of every page, just always make sure that you're saving. Funding distribution is going to be blank. It's going to say 0 until we award you actual funds because it's a competitive grant, so we don't know who we're going to award quite yet. Program information is really where you are inputting the information that we're evaluating you against, right? So we talked about the executive summary. And so again, it tells you exactly how we're, in each section here that you're inputting, we remind you how we're scoring. So we're giving you the prompts to make sure that you're responsive as possible. Bullet points don't look so great in EGMS sometimes, so some of this looks a little bit different from the RFA, but the content is the same. So here's my executive summary. It's not a very good one, and I should be more responsive probably to each of these, but this is just for my testing purposes. Moving on to information about organization. So we've talked about this. Here's the mission and history. Here's the strategic logic. So you're answering both of these responses in your saving page. What some people do is they open up a Word document, and they do that because you probably have a lot of people in your organization that want to edit the grant application. When you do that, please be careful and be aware of the character maximums because it's not words, it's characters. So spaces and periods count. So it's 5,000, generally 5,000 characters for each text box, which is the maximum. So we try to give you as much space as you need, but just be aware of that limitation. Okay, now getting into the organizational knowledge. and this is the experience in each program area. So these are the core competencies, and my silly answer of just we know all these things. Gap identification, organizational network, and ongoing collaboration. So again, these are all of the things that we want to hear from you. You're going to input your answers. Process to provide and monitor services. So here, we want to see each of the answers, but if anyone is applying for all program areas and doesn't have space in here, we can definitely talk about that. Just send me an email as you're going through. If you don't feel that the 5,000 characters is enough to answer all of these, let me know. You can also upload something supplementary in the other attachments, but just flag for me if that's happening, because this is a different kind of design for this grant, so there might be some new challenges this year. Okay. I'm just writing one note to myself. Okay, so moving forward with the communication strategy, the process for continuous learning, and the development of the work plan and evaluation collection plan. That actually shouldn't be there, so I'm going to talk about that. Okay, ignore that one for a second. That shouldn't be there because the work plan and data collection evaluation plan themselves are right here. So we'll move to that, but I will fix that. Okay, so for the work plan, I mentioned before we have 6 objectives. This is what this looks like in here. So it's the same instructions from the RFA. We're looking for the activity, milestones, party, the start date, and the finish date. So you do that. You need to do at least 3, and you do that for each objective. If you don't do 3, you will get an error message, and that's something that a consistency check would catch. Same thing for the evaluation and data collection plan. You're organizing around each of those objectives. You need to give us a program-specific measurable objective that kind of breaks a sub-objective, basically, that breaks that big one down, the methodology for collecting information about that objective, and the expected outcome. So you're doing that for each of the 6 objectives. Now for the staffing plan. The staffing plan is important. This is where we want to see your program manager, project manager position, the Spanish and Amharic speaking staff. We want to see resumes, qualifications, and credentials, position descriptions. So here I'm putting my annual salary, my level of effort, my start date, and this should match my detailed planned expenditures tab. And so for here, I'm saying that an $80,000 annual salary and 100% level of effort, then I would be budgeting $80,000 of my salary directly in planned expenditures, right? So that should match clearly. Another thing in here is the other attachment. So we're looking to see all of these things. Just to highlight the executive executed or draft partnership agreements. That's what we mentioned before. So that's really your time to spell out the scope of responsibilities of any partner organizations. All right, moving on to the detailed planned expenditures. The only narrative section in here is the financial management, which we talked about. Then this is really numbers. In the budget overview, there's really 2 valuable tools here that I hope everyone is using. So if you click here, click on these 2 documents, one and here. Okay, so these do a good job of defining the categories and the subcategories, and then there's also instructions. So please be sure to review those documents. They're in there, and if you come to the in-person meeting next week, I will hand out those documents. So this is very tiny, but you can always zoom. So this breaks down, okay, I have salaries and benefits, but I'll show you within salaries and benefits, do I put something under instruction? Do I put it under support services? Do I put it under administrative costs? So this is very exhaustive of what we expect in each category and subcategory, and we're very careful to update it. So please pay attention to this document, use it as a resource, and then the other one, the instructions. See if I can get this one to open. This is similar. So it gives pretty detailed instructions of what we're looking for. We're looking for gross salaries and wages, names of staff members, and we want it to match between the detailed plan expenditures and the staffing plan. So we kind of walk through this, the fringe benefits, what is equipment, what is supplies and materials. So please use this as a resource because kind of common mistakes in the budget will not be a reason. It will not be a reason that we would reject an application alone, but it will just take time. So if we want you as an applicant and the budget has a lot of, you've put all your equipment and supplies and materials, or your staffing plan and your salaries and benefits don't align, Those are all post-award negotiations that we'll have to make, and it'll just delay when the grant can really get up and running. So it's really in your interest to kind of review these things and understand what OSSI expects from budgeting, because I know that every funder is a little bit different, as much as we really try not to be. Moving into each category, so in salaries and benefits, like I mentioned, you need to pick a subcategory. So that's where that program category descriptions will be helpful, so you understand. You also need to link that person to a different objective. So these are all my activities for my work plan. I name them very numerically, so it's objective 1, activity 1 is my system. So you can kind of see you need to link it to one of the 18 at least activities that you're making. The portion to be paid, the description, and then the amount of funds. So this would be an issue in my budget because I said that my 100% of my $80,000 salary was being spent on the grant, and I'm only budgeting $5,000, so that would be a question if I were to be awarded. Professional services, here is where I might say program area 1 contractor, program area 2 contractor, or if I have someone that's doing both program area 1 and 2, that's where I would put them. I would put them as a single line item here and a lump sum. I'm going to delete those because otherwise it's going to get mad at me for not budgeting money. At the bottom of each page, I'm going to hit save the page. Okay. Going through equipment, the unit cost of equipment has to be $5,000 or more. So a laptop is probably not equipment. A large photocopier might be equipment, but then we would wonder why you're buying a photocopier and charging the whole thing to the grant, right? So equipment has to be $5,000 per item. Supplies and materials are the rest. We don't see a lot of equipment in our grants in early education. So if you're thinking equipment, I would question yourself because it's probably supplies and materials. Fixed property costs would be things like rent, utilities. Other objects could be travel, liability insurance, those kinds of things. Another important note is about indirect cost. So we can offer indirect cost in 10% indirect cost for nonprofit organizations. If you have a federally negotiated rate, what's called a NICRA, a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement with the federal government, we can honor that, but you have to email me as soon as possible and give me a copy of your NICRA. NICRAs are usually more than 10%. They're usually higher because if you wanted less than 10%, you wouldn't go through all the trouble, and it is a lot of trouble to get one. So what this little box at the bottom will do is it will tell you how much you are allowed to budget for indirect costs. So this is a very high budget because I was just playing and seeing what mistakes I could catch with the system. So what it will do is if I had an allowable budget of $30 million, which would be nice, the maximum indirect cost, it will calculate it for you, and you'll notice that it's not a nice round number. It's not exactly 10% of this because of this kind of complicated formula. I can walk through this if anyone has questions about it, but generally it confuses people, so I'm just going to say it's correct, and it's done according to the federal requirements, because if I gave 10% of 30 million and 15,000, if I gave 10% of that, it would be too high. It would be over 30 million, 15,000, which in this scenario is my grant ceiling. So it's kind of carved out of that amount. And then over here, it tells me how much I need to reduce. So it's a little bit confusing, but the summary is if you are a nonprofit organization and you would like the 10% and you don't see it there, let me know. If you are an organization that has a negotiated rate and you want more than the 10%, let me know. This little chart on the left-hand side will calculate it for you, and what you need to do is you need to input it in G. So this is where you budget for it. So people try to budget sometimes in other objects, and that's incorrect. You have to budget for it here, and then the system will tell you what you're doing. So right now the system is telling me that I don't have that money to budget the $25,000. Okay, so hopefully the indirect cost hasn't confused everybody, because a lot of people find it very confusing. The last piece here that I want to talk about is the assurances. We have some program-specific assurances. They go beyond what is in the central data. So here they are. They're nothing earth-shattering. We want staffing pattern or job description changes to be approved. If you are changing staff that work on the grant, we need to see an amendment in those two places. We want to see pre-employment criminal background checks. we need qualified staff, the living wage, and then quarterly reports and other information. So again, here, this is a place that you'll have that legal entity agrees button. And I clicked it on July 5th, and then it populated this date. Okay, so here I did an amendment so I can actually do the consistency check and show you what it looks like. So it will run here. And it does take a long time like this. So here, it's giving me some issues and my submit button is not appearing. So that's an example of what's happening. So I hope that that is clear to everybody. Let's see. Okay, so this is giving you a list of the tabs that are in there, the major level tabs. Here are the, here's more tabs. Here's the budget, what the budget looks like, the required attachments we talked about, and then the consistency check. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording so we can get into some questions.